Bill Higgins, we're really glad you're here in your suit and tie today. Thank you very much for gracing the Road Charge Committee. We should make him sit next to Ann so everybody could see how the fine quality threads that he is wearing today. All right. Well, let me find my agenda here on the screen. We are back to reconvening the afternoon session of the June 26th meeting of the Road Charge Technical Advisory Committee. We're at item 15 on our agenda. These are the policy decisions. And so what I'm going to do is ask Carrie to read the policy questions and the staff recommendations first, if she would, please.
You ready?
Carrie, please. Sorry.
Okay, so we have 4 key policy decisions that we want the TAC to address today. We're going to start with number 4, seeing though that was the last conversation that we had before we broke for lunch. And it is, what non-mileage based road charge accommodations does the TAC recommend testing in the pilot? Staff has a recommendation, as soon as I find it. Staff recommends that upon review of CalSTA's pilot program assessment, the TAC contemplate recommendations on potential non-mileage-based road charge accommodations for Commission consideration. Do you have that up?
Give us a chance to get that on the screen, no problem. And if the members of the committee would look at, well, we'll wait till we get to 15D. We get that on the screen. Tab 15, folks.
Tab 15, the last page of tab 15. We got it. So it's now displayed up on the screen. Number 4. Do you have any comments or?
Well, I think what we should do is we should really consider number 4 first. I have it on the agenda as 15D, but on this thing on the screen there, it's number 4. So we'll translate. And I think because we should take up number 4 first, because that's where we left off at lunch. And I think maybe between Carrie and Jeff, if you folks can help us through the discussion with the committee, and Jeff can help answer any questions. So you want me to give everybody a chance? I mean, the issue is, what non-mileage-based road charge accommodations does the TAC recommend testing in the pilot? And this is a tough sentence to read. In fact, Lauren Cabe left it for me right here before we left, because he said, what exactly does this mean anyhow? And maybe if, Jeff, you want to comment on that and help us out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One key aspect of this recommendation is actually the wording before the comma, that first we conduct the pilot and we gather the information and the data as been recommended by some of the stakeholder letters and some of the committee members, and then we come back and work with the TAC on potential recommendations going forward.
Okay, so does everybody understand that?
Mr. Chairman, if I can, I don't understand that either. I agreed with Lauren on this. So I think it comes down to, and we've discussed this internally, to work out a situation where we advise the TAC on what we think and you can certainly argue that. What we think under the statute is the TAC's continuing role throughout the process. And if you follow SB 1077 to this very specifically, after you make your recommendations, and they are your recommendations to the agency secretary, The agency secretary takes those recommendations and develops the procurement documents and everything else, and Caltrans and the agency take the ball at that point and they carry it forward. You do not have a role until the end of the process under the statute. Now, what we think would make some sense is if we could work out a process, and I've talked to Norma about this, if we could work out a process where we might be able to convene the TAC every so often through that period, so you could keep posted on what's happening in the process, how the procurement effort has gone, how the pilot itself is going, and then in the third phase, after the pilot, or in the fourth phase rather, after the pilot's completed, the evaluation and the reporting that will be done, and then that information is reported to you, to a variety of folks, including the legislature, by the way, and to the commission. And at that point, we think it would make sense that the TAC would be reconvened to receive your input and reaction to what's gone on, and then it would be up to the commission to then carry those recommendations or any recommendations forward to the legislature. Now, I can't speak for the commission. They might say, no, we don't agree with the TAC on this particular point, so we're not going to include that in our recommendations. But presumably they would be open and take your input as it goes forward. The legislature itself doesn't have to listen to any of those recommendations. They can do whatever they want with regard to that information. But I thought it would be good to get that down on paper so you had a sense of what your continuing role through this process. We haven't discussed this before, and I think it makes sense that you would be kept posted and informed as to what's going on throughout the phase two.
And consulted.
Well, they certainly consulted, but there's no requirement that the department or the secretary would do anything about that. You've already developed the framework and recommended that forward. It really, Mr. Chairman, I think is more of an issue of keeping the TAC informed as to what's going on, so you're up to speed on what's happening throughout that process. And then again, at the end, we would sit down with you, the commission would sit down with the TAC, and we'd talk about all of this.
Yeah, I thought the point I was making is that the commission interactively, I even envision a joint commission TAC meeting at some point that would probably have all of you sit with the California Transportation Commission, because we're done with this and we still have a number of meetings to go. You're going to basically be experts on this process that are going to be very important for others, not only the commission but the legislature, to understand. Norma, did you want to address?
Yeah, Will and I discussed this point, and certainly, throughout the process, we would be keeping the TAC informed, whether it be a written report. We don't envision, quarterly or monthly meetings, maybe quarterly, maybe the first year, a couple of times a year, depending. But we are establishing an executive steering committee where I've asked Will to participate in that, and Undersecretary Brian Andis, so that throughout the life of the development of the pilot and the actual pilot itself, we're kind of kept in touch with what's happening in developing the pilot, what issues we're facing, and then we would have some kind of written report that could be shared with the TAC.
And I would, and we haven't talked about the specific membership, I would think it would be very good if the chair was part of that effort too, so that there's a more direct nexus to the Technical Advisory Committee.
So the issue in front of us, though, so as we look at these accommodations and things, this is to me something that, unless the consultants or staff have feelings one way or another, we could move from this today and we can come back with further dialogue in the future. Am I off base here, Richard?
Thank you. I support this approach because I think that in terms of the social equity issues, for instance, we're not going to know enough now to be able to know if we're going to be getting data on does the charge affect driver behavior, then maybe at the back end we'll be able to say, maybe we should have a tiered charging system or, et cetera. I think it's premature to make those decisions now, so I do support this. I do want to say, though, that I want to make sure that when our report goes out at the end of this first phase, that it does highlight, some of the things, even if they're just in terms of, we do have concerns about these equity issues.
Maybe
We
not
want to make sure-
recommendations specifically, but
Exactly.
yeah.
But we want to keep an eye
highlighting
on them, and when we come back, we want to then delve into them more. I'm sorry, one other reason I support this is because how the money gets spent is something that we don't talk about now, but it comes up at the back end.
Well-
And that's also another part of the equity equation, is how the money gets spent.
But again, that's the legislature's decision, that's their purview. And yes, I mean, as I've
You can make a
always said,
recommendation
You can make
or-
a recommendation to do whatever you want, but
They get themselves elected, so they can do those things.
So, Richard, I characterized it we were talking about this at lunch, I characterized it, as we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
And so I think your comment is right on the money.
But yeah, and I just want to praise you, Richard, on that approach, because I think that it makes sense that that's where we should go. It gives us an opportunity, as I've said all along, and this task force has done a wonderful job embracing this, is that we have the right to make changes as we go. We learn, and we may think differently in September than we thought when we first started in January, and clearly I think we've seen that iteration. So I understand also on the next piece that is it going to be Travis is going to work us through what would be 1, 2, and 3 on the agenda? Is that correct?
Actually, number 1 is the evaluation criteria, so we can take that separate, and then 2 and 3 we can
Okay.
do with Travis.
Why don't you guys tell us which ones? Because I know we've dispensed with 4.
4 is done, we're all in agreement.
Yeah, we're all in agreement.
Okay. So number 1 is the evaluation criteria. What evaluation criteria does the TAC recommend for the pilot? Staff recommends adopting the proposed evaluation criteria as amended and presented today by Travis.
Any questions on that, or does Travis need to go back over anything with anybody, or are we all good? Did you want to say something? You look like you do.
I do. I'll be the fall guy here. I think it would be nice to just, once again, summarize for the TAC what those evaluation criteria that they're going to be approving are.
Yeah, Travis, help us out.
If you have Appendix 2 of the briefing book, starting on page 61, if you start on page 60, you'll see a summary table that shows the 8 categories of criteria and then the number of criteria within each category.
And again, just for everybody to understand, why did we create the appendix? We just thought, briefing book, keep it as simple as possible, put all this extra detail into an appendix, and that's why it's...
It also
Anybody
came
thinks
last
it's-
Friday
Right.
because we weren't unable to prepare the responses to the comments any earlier than that.
And it could state on the bottom, tab 11, if that's any assistance in locating it.
Anybody not have it?
So the 8 categories, I'll just read through them, are related to the following: revenue, cost, operations, user experience, privacy, data security, equity, and communications. Would it be useful to go through each one, or would you just like a high clip of what's in each category? Because there's 50 individual criteria here.
Any desire by members of the task force to delve in any deeper on those? I think they are all pretty well self-explanatory.
And if for those who may have read it, prior, in the pages preceding the table, there was a summary of all of the comments received and how we dealt with those comments as a column in that table so that you can track the comments and how we attempted to deal with them. A lot of the comments were clarifying in nature. There was some confusion about definitions, and I think I highlighted a couple of those. One example of that is on page 62 at the bottom. The last 2 criteria on that page previously said complete projects on time and on budget, but it did not define what we meant by project. We got a number of questions about what we meant. So, for example, what we did was we clarified that we were referring to the pilot project effort with those 2 criteria. And there were a lot of others that required clarifications of that nature.
Everybody good? So Are we good then, everybody? There doesn't seem to be any dissension on that. Do we have a motion then to recommend the updated evaluation criteria by staff?
I'll move that we have.
Motion by O'Connor.
The updated categories.
Second? Second by Professor Wax. All right, any other discussion on these criteria?
A question, two questions. One is, I take it that the pilot will be completed and then a report analyzing the outcomes and the outputs of that will be prepared. And I also take it then that as we learn what we don't know right now and what we don't know, perhaps there will be other evaluative issues that can be raised and addressed at the back end. Is that the intent of our adopting these?
Well, let me kind of go through this a little. The evaluation criteria, we will be hiring a consultant to do an independent assessment of the pilot. So we're going to keep that separate from the project team. And this will help us in developing that request for proposal. There might be other issues that we learn through the pilot that we would also address in the final report. But the success of the project, the pilot, will be judged against this criteria that's been laid out. You know, does it deal with privacy, how well, and what other issues? So I think the report is not just going to be, did it meet this criteria and how well, or there'll be other issues as well.
All right, so we have a motion from O'Connor, second from Professor Wax. Any other discussion on item 1, policy decision? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. All right, let's move to number 2.
Number 2, Travis will be walking us through the matrix, and what we'll be addressing is how many participants should be involved in the pilot.
Should point out 2 and 3 go together.
Pretty much,
because
yeah.
both in determining the distribution and the total through the exercise, we'll arrive at those 2 items kind of jointly.
So yeah, I'll show 3 on there as well. How should they be distributed? On your agenda, it's 15B and C. On here, it's 2 and 3.
Okay?
So this is the fun interactive part. Get ready.
Does everybody have a paper copy of the matrix in front of them in case they can't? I'm going to zoom out up here, but if you'd like to follow along on paper.
If you go to tab 15, it's the second page, actually the third page of tab 15. Page number 63 under tab 15.
So, per Professor Wax's earlier suggestion, what we're showing on the screen right now is the minimum number. The conversation can be focused around that. And, Mr. Chair, I'd like to turn it over to you and the committee to begin the process of filling it out.
I'm sorry?
The idea is that the members will interactively decide with it. We can start wherever you like.
Well, let's start at the beginning then. I thought you guys were going to do it. So if you want to start it, I liked the way you walked us through it the other day on the phone. I thought that worked out great.
Okay. Well, why don't we take it one at a time and start with the first category, which is the commercial vehicles across the top row. And this may be an opportunity to punt, if you will, regarding Mr. Sauer's earlier comments about working more closely with the team to identify.
I'd rather do it this way so everybody can.
Okay. So the first 3 cells in the upper left corner are passenger car commercial vehicles. So this would be car fleets, basically, that are business-oriented. And the idea is that we want to have a representation of fleets, and that we also wanted to have representation from Northern, Central, and Southern California fleets. So the question to the members is what is a good number of fleet vehicles that you believe would adequately capture feedback from that segment of the population? And we've pre-populated it. Again, I won't even read the numbers because these are purely indicative. But if you have other suggestions, we'd be open to your ideas.
Eric, we're all looking to you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like truck
There's a reason we're all not saying anything.
It's a trick, right after lunch, too. I guess I'm just going to echo what I said earlier. I really feel it's imperative that we before we march on selecting a number and defining it as a fleet size or geographic region. I think I mentioned before that you have certain segments of the industry that are operating in seasonal operations in various locations throughout the state. There's so many different segments of the industry that, I want to make sure that we're maybe not forgetting, that we're including. I think it's just premature for this group, and you can tell me I'm wrong, but I just think it's premature for this group to today come up and establish this on something that is, something that hasn't been
Vetted in your
ventured
community.
into.
Okay, well, maybe what we could do is approve something that's contingent on your industry weighing in.
Mhm.
That make sense?
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, we can, my staff and I are prepared to clear the decks to work with the consultants leading up to next month's meeting. And
Okay.
so if that means a few meetings here and there, we can make time to travel to meet with them, or they can make time to travel with us. I'm all for it. I want to make sure that we're getting this right. I want to make sure that I'm doing my members a service of, protecting their interests and protecting, the reliability of this project as well. So,
Pam?
And Skagit had sent a letter yesterday, you might not have seen, that talked about wanting to understand the market segmentation of commercial vehicles, a little bit better refinement of that, the industry and carrier modes, what's industry, what's a carrier business model for hire carriers, and I'm learning all of this new stuff from it. So to me, that seems a reasonable approach, because it is a unique, specific way of moving goods and freight.
Walk us just through, if we were to plug in numbers, just so we could see this. You've got I take it, on fleets, just show everybody how this thing works. So we'll start with small fleet.
One of the segments that was important was owner-operator small fleets, and we'll review determine what an appropriate number to represent that demographic is. The button, apologies. If working with you, we could determine what an appropriate number of small fleet or owner-operators is. We would plug in, we might even develop sort of a sub-matrix of looking at industry demographics, but then we would plug in a subtotal of small fleets right here in this particular cell that's highlighted, whatever that number ends up being, and then that gets reflected in this top clip matrix.
and yeah, that's one of the things that we can drill down on. I just want to make sure that we're treading lightly with respect to the owner-operators. They contract out with licensed motor carriers, which there is some arm's length distance relationships between the motor carrier and the owner-operator. I just want to make sure that we're perfectly fine on trying to have that group get involved.
Appreciate that.
So just say, and Shannon, I think, did a great job putting this thing together. As I recall, these things are pretty interactive. So you could change a number here.
For example, if we did that exercise and decided that we identified 20 owner-operators,
Let's just throw that number
we
in.
would throw the number in, and then you can't see it. I'll scroll over to the left. There's a table over here on the left-hand side that shows you all the totals and subtotals.
This is what I wanted you guys to see. So you could see right there, it shows the grand total of 5,070 out of all of these various variations. And
Right.
so basically, the idea in the exercise is by picking, these ranges, and I kind of like the idea that maybe just as we're doing for the trucking, we ought to do the same thing on all of this for now until we have more information versus, what the consultant is going to come on. Maybe just adopt this as a tentative number pending additional information at the next meeting. But that's what I wanted everybody to see, is the summary on the left takes everything that gets put into those cells to the right and comes up with a number. So you'll see tribal vehicles for the whole state, 25. You'll see individuals, 4,125. These all, these give us the numbers that ultimately might be part of the sample. And I think, Norma, we've been talking, comes out pretty close to what we've been talking about, 5,000 to 6,000, right?
Correct.
So.
We had to estimate a number for our budget request, so that's the range of fees. That's what we're looking for.
Richard?
I'm sorry that I'm going to have to step out for about a half an hour for a call, but I was looking for this, so thank you. And then the other thing is, so all of these cells would add up to the bottom line number, right? But then there's also questions that I think the suggestion that came up when we talked earlier was, for instance, men and women is not something that shows up here, but across all of the categories, we want to be tracking some.
It's there.
I hadn't shown this earlier.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I know it's in the fine print, but I'm saying it's not in the main chart, and so we also want to make sure that those things are adding up, even though they don't add up in a particular cell.
But isn't it basically, did you do it, Shannon, just based on on demographic averages and things? It
starts with sort of statewide averages, and then because it is a directly proportional assignment would result in some groups coming in at too small a number to provide what you think is meaningful feedback, you have the opportunity to bump that up a little bit or lower it a little bit if it's appropriate.
So your chart implied demographic averages already? Okay. All right. Very good. Well, then I think that if we go back, flip the screen back over to our action items on number 2, which is how many participants should be involved in the pilot. Why don't we, as a motion then, looking at staff recommends adopting the pilot recruitment targets and definitions established as reflected in the worksheet we just looked at. And a copy of the worksheet will be recorded in the meeting minutes. And I guess, Norma, to add your point with the caveat that the TAC would look at it again upon further consultation with consultants and industry groups. Could that be a motion? Professor Wax so moves. Is there a second? Second. Second from Councilmember O'Connor. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. All right. Item 2, any opposed? Item 2 is adopted unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's go to our last key policy decision, which is number 3, and it's pretty much the same that we just did. How many participants, or how should the participants be distributed throughout the state? And again, it says here by adopting target minimums and maximums established by this TAC for urban, suburban, rural, sub-agricultural, etc. And this will be the same worksheet. We'll have the same caveat that Professor Wax's motion just was, that we could come back and refine it further based on input from the industry and or consultants. Is that your motion, Mr. Wax, Professor? It sounds like his motion. Do we have a second? Second by the mayor. All right. Any other discussion on the item? Seeing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That also carries unanimously. All right. Thank you very much. Carrie, back to you.
All right, so we're moving on to the action items, parking lot, next steps, and other matters. There were a number of action items, specifically meeting with Eric and his team and talking about the trucking alternatives. I will pass it over to Jeff. He will talk to you about what he's recorded.
Committee members, Mr. Chairman, for action items, this is what we have recorded. And the first is consider asking the Department of Motor Vehicles to use their delivery channels to help notify drivers of the opportunity to participate in the pilot. Second action item is to make sure that one of the considerations for targeting participants includes or takes into account alternative fueled vehicles. The third one is that CTC staff will work with the consultant team to research the various options for urban-rural distinctions and definitions and come back to the TAC with a unified staff recommendation on that at the next meeting. The next action item is that the consultant team will work with the California Trucking Association to further define the relevant truck characteristics to test in the pilot project, specifically the definitions of small, medium, and large-size trucking companies. And the last action item that I have is to make sure that the data collected in the pilot is shared with the TAC for your consideration of equity-related implications of a road charge system for your future and final report. In addition, Mr. Chairman, I have 2 items for the parking lot that we'll carry forward for further research. The first is will or how will we allow participants to choose between reporting options in the course of the pilot project. Another somewhat related but second parking lot item is will the vehicles be able to switch or share mileage reporting methods, for example, transferring an annual mileage permit among the different vehicles. We'll research those 2 items as well.
Excellent note-keeping. Thank you. Anything else that was not mentioned by Jeff? And those are good. Thank you for, that's what I love about this parking lot thing. Nothing that we talk about is left for just chance. Okay.
I have
Marty,
another item that I'd like to add to parking lot or for further discussion. Throughout our discussion, we've been somewhat ambiguous between talking about vehicles and talking about people. Every vehicle is owned by a person, and people are going to volunteer, not vehicles. But the records that we go to at DMV and so on, a vehicle can be registered in the name of one individual, a couple, a business, an institution, and I think it requires a little explication as to how these 2 things interact. We talk rather casually about being demographically representative, but when the unit of analysis is the vehicle, how do we actually achieve that? I think it's worthy of a little bit of attention.
So noted. Thank you, Professor Walks. We'll look into reporting back on both the legal and the practical definitions and distinctions between a vehicle, an owner, and a responsible party.
I think that's an outstanding observation. Okay, there are members here in the audience. Some of you haven't had a chance to say anything, as in most, but you're, at this point, get an opportunity, if you'd like, for public comment, to tell us something that we aren't doing right, something that we like, that you like, or just hope that we adjourn this meeting right away so you can all have a wonderful weekend. Hearing none, I just want to, was it somebody else? Nope. Supervisor?
Well, just something that's been sort of sticking with me as we went through the different categories and who's to participate and whatnot, and I think we keep branching way out and then we try to bring it back and simplify. And I understand why we talk about the demographics and even poverty levels and trying to get patterns together, and also because of the scrutiny that we're going to come under that we didn't include somebody to get these figures. But even under the guise of social equity, is there really a reason why we're getting into ethnicity? I mean, on the chart, in its simplest form is what we're trying to do is figure out who's using the roads and how, based on that, how we're going to pay for it. Does it have anything to do with gender or ethnicity? Or does it have more to do with traffic patterns because of where you live? I'm just throwing it out there.
I guess, staff, if you want, consultants want to respond, I mean, I looked at that as really a statistical report more than anything else. It wasn't anything beyond that. Is that just really an analysis based on a percentage of people?
Go ahead, Travis. Your work.
Those figures that were underneath the table or the matrix were intended to provide an opportunity for you to tell us to make sure we capture a minimum number of certain ethnicities, perhaps. For example, without that guidance, theoretically it would be possible that in the recruitment process we ended up with, if the number is 5,000 male participants.
And I get that, and we would be lambasted for that.
So
but I went further than that in saying that, in my own mind, is going, okay, but I can see at some point in time we come back to saying, well, that is not affordable for a certain poverty level people, and if mass transit's not available in that area, then we're going to have to make some adjustments. But I was hoping we were not going to be considering making adjustments for every single category, whether it's gender, ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera.
That I got is implied, correct? We just don't have the time, resources, or desire to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree, don't misconstrue me. I think if we didn't break it out to be inclusive like that, then we would to be told to go back to the drawing board.
But the nice thing about what the TAC approved in the policy action basically does follow demographic averages, correct? Minimums. Minimums. Okay, that's a better word than averages, yeah. Minimums. Okay. Lee, no, you good?
I'm just trying to stretch for you.
It's trying to stretch. I was just trying to adjourn, so. So, is there any other member of the public wanting to offer any comments? Seeing none, I will share with you all, our next meeting is on Friday, July 24th in beautiful South Lake Tahoe, California, at the Lake Tahoe Resort Hotel. Ann Johnson will be working with every member of the committee to make arrangements, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. This meeting of the Technical Advisory Committee is adjourned. Thank you.